We are back for another edition of the Vandy Program. And my guest today is Chea, and we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things. She has an X account. I almost said a Twitter account, but she has an X account. It'll always be Twitter to me. It's called Fair and Biased. She also has a blog of the same name. And we've been interacting on X or Twitter, or maybe both, for a while now, but it's the first chance I've had to have her on the program. So, Jackie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. I'm excited to be here and talk about the news of the day. It should be good.
Yes, and that's the thing that we've tried to do on this here channel is a series we call the news of the day, and we're going to take some topical stuff that's happening, and we do realize that our guests have different points of view on everything that's going on, and so getting a variety of guests to talk about these things is something that's pretty fun and rewarding for me. So, Jackie, I guess question one is if you can give us kind of the brief background, the 30,000 foot overview of who you are, what you do, where you are, and what brought you to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. I am an evangelical Christian from Texas. I live here with my husband and my elementary age son. And at this point in my life, I'm a stay at home mom. Prior to that, my background was mental health, and I have a degree in psychology and a master's in counseling. So that's sort of the background of everything I do. But in this moment, I really direct that more toward my blog. So you mentioned the blog briefly. And it's like after becoming a stay-at-home mom, I started trying to get my thoughts out and just interact with the culture and what I see going on. And it's like there's a storm of things every day, right? So I started that blog, Fair and Biased. And it's really a place for me to talk about all those things intertwined, like my life as a traditional wife and mother, and politics, how I interact with that, with mental health in the background, religion, how those things all work together. And then I started the social media account pretty much just to get the blog out there, but it took on a life of its own. And you can get your thoughts out so quickly on X that it's really like I interact there even more than I do the blog these days, but I do try to get something out every once in a while on the blog.
Let's start with the stay at home mom job,
Yes.
because it's, depending on people's points of view, it's either maligned or it's the greatest thing ever, and in some cases it seems like it's nowhere in between.
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh, how could you be at home and not be out working? And then the flip side is, well, of course, how could you even consider doing something else? But I guess what's been your take on that specific dialogue and how it is sometimes driven by religion, by an evangelical point of view? Sometimes it's driven by other points of view. But what's your take on where kind of stay-at-home mom-dom stands?
I think it's interesting because that is such a huge discussion, even among like the moms that pick up. It's like there's the working moms, there's the stay at home moms, there's the ones that have sort of a combination, like a part time. My view is that it's a privilege to be able to do it, right? I know that not everybody can do it. But I also think that there are many people who choose not to in this day and age. And they do that for a variety of reasons. And some of those reasons are good, and some of those reasons I think are less valuable. I personally, it being my choice, I think, like C.S. Lewis thought, that it's the number one job, in my opinion. There's nothing I've ever done that I find more valuable than this. And I don't think there will be a moment I regret. So the longer I do it, it's like my son, he's young, but he's in school now. I wondered, like, when he was in first grade, will I go back to work? And then now I start to ask well, I don't even wonder it right now. I have no plans at the moment because I can still see how valuable it is, even while he's in school. Um, because there are so many moments, like I'm the room mom, right? Always. I'm at the school all the time. You can be a pickup. You're there all summer. There's just so much value to it, and you can just speak into their lives. I think this is something that we don't value enough. I hate to shame the moms who work because, like I said, I think there's value to that too. I think people choose it for different reasons and out of necessity and out of really important things they have going on. But I listened to a very interesting psychoanalyst. Her name's Dr. Erica Komisar, and she talks about this. And she says that, women, they can have it all, but they can't have it all at the same time. And that's my opinion too. I think no matter what, as a mom, you choose, you're giving something up. So the question is, what do you want to give up? And in my opinion, I don't want to give up a minute of this time when he's so young. So that's kind of my take on it.
And I got to be honest, I enjoyed watching your X account as you were talking about some of the stuff that you were doing during the summer and
Yeah.
the ability to say, go visit dad at work over lunch and those sorts of things, and just kind of hang out in the summer and watch your kid grow and grow with your kid while all this is happening. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's dynamite. But
Thanks.
yeah, to your point, I get that there are a variety of points of view to the argument.
And people get very heated about it because it's a judgment on your motherhood, right? Am I doing right by my child? Am I doing right by myself? Am I contributing enough to society? Most people that make my choice think there's no better way to contribute to society than pouring into your child while you have those years. And Dr. Komisar, who I mentioned, she took years at home when her kids were the youngest, and then she started her practice again. And now she's had a really thriving practice for many years. She's on all the shows and she's doing everything she wanted to do. She just paused. I think that's another thing that's good to remind women that that's an option.
Yeah, and we've seen that if we segue a little bit into politics, which we're of course going to talk about. We've seen that with Caroline Lovett, who obviously is at the top of her game.
Yeah.
But as kid 2 has arrived, and 2 is we had 3, so I mean, going from 1 to 2 is kind of like, oh my gosh, and then you start to maybe change your priorities just a little bit. It was, and I think that's part of what she's planning on doing, because that with somebody like her, we have not seen the last of her. I mean, she's obviously young and very dynamic, and let's say for our left-leaning viewers, she's a very polarizing figure. So that she'll be back in some way, shape, or form, possibly running for office again.
I love to see her trajectory because, I'm glad she took the job to begin with, and I'm glad she's taking a pause. So it's like she's kind of done both of those things. But I think you're right. The jump from 1 to 2 while they're both babies, and how demanding that job would be with travel and all that. I think it's a great example to women that despite all her skills and that she had this opportunity, she chose to take some time.
Yep. So let's stay in the political realm, and I mean, do I have lists? Do I have notes? Do I have things that we could talk about? Let's stick with when you and I first started talking about going on the show. One of the things that I seemed to zero in on was the concept of political craziness, and I think you're finding it on both sides of the equation.
Yes.
I wrote down Candace and Tucker. And let's start there, because I think there are quite a few people who might have been mystified or drawn in by the Candace Owens mystique early on. She obviously speaks very well, eloquently. She has very strong opinions. But also, in all fairness, she has given the impression the last couple of years of being bat guano crazy. And now it seems like Tucker Carlson is also in that sort of camp of used to be on the right and now maybe a different brand of the right, and we're not exactly sure where he's coming from. So what do you make of the grasp for audience, the grasping for audience has taken place on the right, especially with the the Candace and Tucker
Yeah.
types that seem to glom onto any weirdo thing that is out there.
I have spent 2 years trying to make sense of that. Like a lot of people, I I used to I used to follow them to some extent. I was never honestly a huge fan of either one of them, but I certainly viewed them as allies. Right? I didn't like certain things about their style. Um, but I thought they were generally allies. And now when you say he's maybe sort of on the right, I would say he's not even on the right anymore. I would say he's gone all the way off. But I've heard him described, I think it was Jeremy Boring that described him as um, socially conservative but economically liberal, and liberal in foreign policy as well. At this point, it's like he's leaning into all these populism ideas, and like on foreign policy, he's much closer to someone like Bernie or Barack Obama than he is to anybody on the right at this point. It's like, yes, he's still got some of these socially conservative views, and I think that's about all he's got left. But he doesn't seem to value them as much as he values a lot of the other things either. Candace, I've tried to make sense of her. I think Tucker really almost has this really idealistic political vision that I totally disagree with, but I think he has a vision. I think it's toxic, but that's what he's working toward. Candace, I don't think she works toward anything but herself. And I used to think at some point, that she had these strong political beliefs, but she's picked them up and put them down, and now, like I said, just thrown them down so quickly, so easily, and she flip-flops to such an extent on people. I do believe she's just a grifter. I think she sees what the newest opportunity is. They say this true crime like place on YouTube is one of the biggest rising um spaces for people to make money and gain followings. And I think that she's all in on the conspiracy now. She wants to be like she is the next Alex Jones and probably bigger. She has a different audience. But I think that's the direction she's going with that. It's been shocking for most of us that were part of the conservative movement, like to see these people that were working for Turning Point, Candace's case, Daily Wire, PragerU. She got her start with David Horowitz, which again, I think 3 out of those 4 are led or run by Jews, and the 4th an Evangelical Christian, Turning Point. And all those things she seems to hate now. She seems to have antipathy for Judaism. She truly hates evangelicals, and as one, I've been really watching her direct more and more of her animosity toward my group. When she only converted to Catholicism, maybe 2 years ago, or somewhere around there, maybe 3, but she only was baptized this year. It's like she's switching everything so rapidly. So is Tucker. And then all these people are aligning because they have something in common. What that is, I think, is really just to tear down what exists now. And I think they have their own goals and reasons they want to do that, but they all seem to be working together toward that end. And Trump is in the way, even though they were on his side originally. It now seems like very quickly they decided they're a different brand than he is, and they're his enemies now. Very quickly, very surprisingly.
I wonder if part of that is because they were behind Trump because they thought Trump could help them.
Maybe.
And now that Trump is a lame duck, and also he's supporting Israel, and that is a questionable concept in the minds of this. I know James Lindsay. I still struggle with understanding the term woke right.
Yeah.
But from the context of just doing the same things that the
Yeah.
woke left did for a long time, and using it to kind of squeeze the masses. I think that it might be the best description of what
The
those two are
term.
up to.
Because I think when I hear James Lindsay talk about it, he's talking about critical theory, right? Victim mentality, all those things, and then using those same tactics that you're talking about. I see all of that in this fringe movement. I like dissident right too, because I
Okay.
think that's kind of what they are. Um, but I do think there's elements of woke that fit them, certainly. And I think the reason that term has not died, it still persists, and people still fight about that term woke, right, is because there's at least part of it that hits home, that people can see what he's talking about, you know?
So is it the victim mentality that is probably the biggest thing that makes it quote unquote woke?
I think it's that and the fact that it's identity politics. It's like you'll see the woke right. They're very heavy into the I like to look at it as like a dark mirror, right? I look at the woke left, and they're generally, you'll see a lot of hatred toward men. You'll see a lot of hatred toward whites. You'll see a lot of these identity groups forming in that way. You'll go to the opposite, and it's like a pendulum movement, a reactionary movement. It's like you actually will see what the left claimed. You'll see the hatred toward the minority groups. Like being in an interracial marriage myself, I have gone up against the woke right, and they will say the most disgusting things to me. And I'm like, what the left described them as, they've decided to be. But it's like a reactionary movement, and it does not represent the normal right by any means. And I think the woke left represents the left as a whole much more than this little movement, which is why we're trying to reject it so forcefully in many camps. But so if the left hated men, the woke right hates women. If they hated whites, the woke right hates blacks and Jews. And it's, to me, it's just like reactionary pendulum movement with the same type of identity politics, victim narratives, and that sort of demoralization op, which is what I think Tucker and Candace are running, that you cannot escape it. Like, oh, well, and I agree with many of the criticisms of how men have been treated in this society. And I spoke very forcefully about that. But when I hear the woke right talk about it, it's like with hatred, like women did this to us. And like, what can we do but fight back in this way? And I'm like, well, you can point this out, and we can talk about the discrepancies. Like women are now ahead in education, like more are going into the medical field, all kinds of things that I think really need to be addressed, but not in the way they're addressing it by just acting demoralized and like, our reaction is to hate Jews and try to tear down the system. And none of that makes sense. So that's where I think it gets woke. You might have real problems you're addressing, but the way they're not addressing them, they're really just looking for targets to blame and wallowing.
It's a pretty yeah. That makes a lot of sense. The way you put that. Um, so let's talk about the DSA.
Yes. Okay. Well, the woke left.
Yeah. And I guess since you're in Texas, let's look at the through line between the DSA and the James Talaricos of the world, because I don't think Talarico is officially a DSA member.
No, I don't believe so, but he's certainly friendly toward it.
He's certainly friendly toward it. And I made the remark months ago when he did that whole experiment on Stephen Colbert's show, the thing that was going to air and didn't air and became like a controversy and all that. I made the observation back then that he is LARPing as a religious person, and
Yes.
the brand of Christianity that he subscribes to is certainly not a brand that is very biblical.
No, not at all.
So yeah, so what do you make of let's start there. What do you make of the race between an obviously flawed Ken Paxton as a candidate
Yeah. Yeah.
versus a James Talarico LARPer as a minister?
This was a really tough, this is a tough race. I had a hard time in the primary deciding between Cornyn and Paxton because people have their complaints about Cornyn, and so do I. Sort of an establishment character. You feel like he could be doing more. But then Paxton has all this baggage, right? He's done a lot as AG, a lot of things I really like. But then he has quite a bit of baggage. So it's like, how electable is he? Hopefully quite electable, because the alternative is James Talarico. And there is a lot of support for him. Like, I see a lot of his signs going up in the yards around here. But that's also common. That's also common because the Democrats in Texas are always really excited to try to win that Senate seat. And they get pretty close because Texas is getting purple more than it was. They always get pretty close, but they usually don't pull it out. But every time they think this is our shot, right? So Beto, there was a similar frenzy around Beto O'Rourke, and everyone was saying he's going to win. And, he comes in on the skateboard and everybody loves him and all the signs go up. Obviously he fizzled out. I hope James Talarico is the same thing, but he has looked for his little opportunity and he has a different brand, and it's what you say. He's LARPing really as a religious person when he's not, in my opinion. And it's not really just my opinion, because I've argued with a lot of people about this because I have friends who like him and who support him. And a lot of them, this is what's interesting, are even, I don't really want to call them conservative, but they're Republican leaning, or maybe they're right-leaning independent. And they like what he's saying because they're also religious people. And he speaks in like such a soft way about love and, God just wants everyone to belong and all these things. And it sounds very soft. It sounds very nice. But James Talarico just does not believe Christian doctrine. And that's why I say it's really not just my opinion. It's Christian doctrine. Like the man, he gives sermons because I believe he has some kind of religious training. He gave a sermon on the resurrection. If you go listen to a sermon on the resurrection, it's largely metaphorical. I'm not sure he even believes in a physical resurrection. There's so many things. He certainly doesn't believe in a concept of repentance and sin that is a typical Christian doctrine. I'm sure he would say there are some things that are sin, but it seems largely up to the individual and more about, he really does prioritize that marginalization acceptance over sin, which is why you'll see him. I think he was like I don't want to get that wrong, like the grand marshal, or at least like the headliner of a pride parade where there was a child drag star. This is not traditional Christian doctrine. All kinds of things when he tried to compare the incarnation of Jesus to an example of Mary giving her consent. So he drew that back to abortion. I don't know if you heard that one. Yeah.
Oh, I remember that one. That one got a lot of attention because of just
Yeah.
how completely wrong and backwards it was.
And ignoring the obvious fact that it's a very different thing to consent to the conception than for the conception to have already occurred and then to make the choice to terminate it. Or obviously different things, and the fact that that would even be compared was very odd. The thing where he said God is non-binary, obviously. He doesn't have a traditional view of God. He doesn't have a traditional view of the inerrancy of Scripture. He's made very clear. I think I compared him to Captain Barbosa in Pirates of the Caribbean when he was saying the pirate code is, it's really more like guidelines. I think that's how Talarico views the Bible. It's really more like guidelines. I don't think he thinks it's the inspired word of God. Like many so-called progressive Christians, I would think he probably views like the Apostle Paul as like a man who made some mistakes and was speaking on behalf of his time. And they reject a lot of what they don't like. And that's how I see Talarico. But the fact that he speaks as a man of God, as I think he even would consider himself evangelical, would he, or something of that sort? It's
I mean, to me, that's why I get back to the LARPing thing.
yeah.
And I come from the background of somebody who I call myself a boomerang Catholic. I come from the background of somebody who spent the last 20 or so years going to the Methodist Church. And then I came back to Catholicism a year ago. I grew up Catholic. And to me, what Talarico says publicly is very, very similar to what I heard in the Methodist Church, where it was a lot of kumbaya, a lot of let's put up the pride flag so we can be all welcoming. And then as we're welcoming, we're also going to maybe shift the Overton window some more so that we can, it's, that's just a guideline. And it's not, it's damaging in my viewpoint. It's just damaging spiritually to be doing that, talking in those sorts of ways and claiming to be a preacher of some sort.
Well, Talarico, yeah, the reason it is so damaging is because I think number one, he doesn't preach a clear gospel, and it's certainly not one that includes acknowledging your sin and repentance in the sense that has been laid out in the Bible. So it's no gospel at all. And so you're pulling people into that. And then on top of that, he chooses certain things that the Bible would define as sin, and he uses the Bible to excuse them. Well, he twists the Bible. And that's just the definition of a false prophet. So I feel like also, your background, Catholic, Methodist Catholic. I was Catholic until I was about 20, and I've been evangelical since, but I have much, much more in common with a Catholic than I do with James Talarico, no matter what he calls himself. So like all the traditionally minded Christians would have much more in common.
Yeah, I agree on that. And I think I spent the better part of 2018 commuting from Chicago to Dallas. I spent a lot of time in Dallas. And I remarked back then that because I was spending so much time, I was in the Denton area and then in Dallas
Oh yeah.
County, because I had spent so much time there, it wasn't until about October when I had branched out a little bit into sort of heading towards Fort Worth that I saw my first Ted Cruz signs. So I can understand the thinking that Beto was going to win just from the fact that the media tends to focus on the big cities. And so if you're in New York and you're doing the story for NBC National or whatever, you're going to call your affiliate and they're going to be on the ground in Dallas and they're going to say, well, this is what we're seeing. And when you
Right.
talk to people, you're going to get more of that. Um, I would gather that it's the same sort of phenomenon now, except my thinking is that Talarico is just a beta. I flubbed that line. Talarico is just a beta Beto,
Oh, beta better.
and that he doesn't bring kind of that with Beto. And again, I was probably a little more politically, maybe in the middle 8 years ago. But I remember thinking, all right, this guy, he's a little on the wacky side. He had
Yes.
the take everybody's guns ideas, and but I can remember thinking, well, he probably wouldn't be that bad to hang out and have a beer with.
Yeah.
I don't have the same thinking about Talarico.
I think
Now,
Talarico is very cringe.
yeah, and I don't know. Granted, were I to fly to Texas, I don't think I'd want to have a beer with Ken Paxton either.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't see. I talk to people in Texas who say, "Oh, it's Talarico, he's the bee's knees." But I'm kind of, I don't. To your point, I think the cringe factor is probably what is not going to carry him over the finish line.
I think he's cosplaying as Christian, in my opinion. He's also cosplaying as this like masculine Texan. And that's very, very obviously false. So I think that's part of what you're speaking to. Most of the people that I know who like him are women. I really don't know a lot of men who are Talarico fans at this point. I'll find out more as we go into the election, but it's like the people that are all in for him that I know are women. I think he's got that very feminine vibe, but yet he wants to go out and eat the barbecue and put the hat on, and it's just discordant. It doesn't feel authentic. I do feel he's very inauthentic. I don't know if people will pick up on that or not. I'm in a blue city also. I'm in a big city, so yeah, you're always going to see a lot of support for the Democratic candidate. But we're, in Texas, even in the big cities, there's a lot of Republicans, so you're not lonely.
And they're probably less quiet, I would guess, than they were, say, during Trump won. Because when
Oh
I
yeah.
was going to Texas and I was working it
Yeah.
was a pretty diverse political environment, the office I
Yeah.
worked in. It wasn't very big, but we would have a lot of discussions that were very like, well, I understand that you support this person, but also then this. And,
Yeah.
it seemed to be a little, they were more open. I would imagine it's even more open now to,
It is. After Trump 2.0, it's like to commit to Trump the second time. you couldn't hide. So people got louder. And after Charlie Kirk, I think a lot of people have decided they're not going to be quiet about what they think, whether it's about Talarico or anything else. So I do feel like people are pretty outspoken. One thing about Paxton, and I heard the other day that Jesse Waters was critical, that he didn't think Paxton was out in the public eye and campaigning enough. And I agree. I don't think there's just enough talk about Paxton at all. Like, you don't hear about him that much. You hear a ton. I mean, of course, you hear the left's attack lines on him. But I hope in these next 2 months he gets out there and he starts campaigning, because we hear too much about Talarico. I would like to hear more about Paxton.
To be fair, though, and I hear your point, and we're a couple days after the Jesse Waters interview with Abdul El Sayed in Michigan, and that was kind of train wrecky. That had
Yeah.
a lot of train wreck elements, and we're just a few weeks removed from the main situation. And then we also had the Darlene Graham thing. I guess the oxygen on the right isn't directed yet towards Texas, and may not be directed until they see it as because let's face it, if the powers that be start saying, okay, well, there could be some trouble in Texas, we'll start seeing Ken Paxton on the shows, I would guess.
You're right about that. Texas is usually a safe state. Most people, despite the polling, because polling has Talarico ahead pretty consistently in not all, but some of the major polls. Again, I don't really think that's strange. You see that in some of the other elections too. Most people still think it's a relatively safe seat for Ken Paxton. So, but I think he's going to have to fight for it. The question is just when he's going to jump in, and how much they're going to direct resources. But you're right, Maine is more of a focus right now. That's an interesting one, and some of these other races that are going to be closer.
And then I think, so we're back to the DSA.
Right.
Back to the DSA concept, because now I guess if I saw it correctly, AOC is officially a DSA member.
So that's what I was doing a little research on it, but I've got to be honest, it was Grok. I was looking this up recently, so it's like you always have to double check your sources. I will double check that, but my understanding was that she used to be a member. She had taken a pause from it, and then she rejoined, and I think she rejoined this year. And they're becoming more and more radical. So it's like, if you choose to officially renew your membership now, I think that really says something.
Well, I think part of it has to do with Mamdani, because she was very vocal in getting Mamdani elected.
Yeah.
And this kind of had to fall in line. But so if she is or is not a DSA member, right now in the betting markets, on the prediction markets, she's the leader for the Democratic nomination.
I find that so hard to believe, because I think she's such a silly person. But I would have thought Kamala Harris was an impossible choice. So it could happen. And I've seen the same things you're seeing. As far as that goes, like the DSA, I know, like when Mamdani ran, he is a member of DSA, but he made it clear, which I think counts for nothing. But he said, like, my platform as mayor is not the national platform of the DSA. What does that even mean? That would be more compelling if the DSA was a typical political movement. Like, I could see someone saying, this is what I believe, like a conservative saying, these are my beliefs, but that doesn't represent everything that the Republican establishment stands for. However, the DSA is almost like an insurrectionist movement. They want a completely different form of government, where the president is not elected by the Electoral College, where the Senate is abolished and it just becomes one Congress, and then they choose the presidential candidate, they choose the Supreme Court. So, I mean, this is not what we have now. They want a new constitution. So it's a whole different thing to say, I'm a member of this group, even if I don't agree with everything they say. It's like, how are you even a member of this group?
Yeah, and I thought it was funny that, I guess not funny, haha, but funny that I think her name is Angie Nixon, the one who is the the DSA candidate in Florida for Senate,
Okay. I'm not as
who,
familiar with her.
yeah, she won against Alexander Vindman in the primary.
Oh,
She's
yes.
the DSA candidate, but she also supports the platform, which includes abolishing the
Oh,
Senate. So, and we know that once you're, I mean, the kind of the laws of power dynamics or whatever, once you are in power, you are not going to give up said power. So, why would someone run for a Senate seat under a platform that says we're going to get rid of the Senate seat?
it feels much like the revolutionaries in previous movements, like the Russian revolutionaries. It's like you use the existing system in one way or another to gain power, and then you have the power now. So it's like if they were to win and get everything they want and abolish the Senate, they would already be in the Senate and they would probably just say, well, now I'm one of this collective Congress. It's like, and then they would be in control. But it's very cynical to try to use something that you don't even think should exist to gain the power to destroy it.
Yeah, I can't make a lot of sense of that, but I know it's a scary
It's
platform.
very scary. And
And
most people do not know. Like, you'll just run into people all the time. Oh, yeah, socialism. It sounds good. It sounds fair. It's like they have no idea what it's really done historically everywhere, or what the platform is even in their own country.
I think there's a narrative problem here, and I want to tease this out a little bit because the the narrative that I see on a lot of the left leaning and far left parts of social will say things like, "Well, socialism is just like what they have in Norway," and well, Norway powers its social programs through North Sea oil drilling. And that's how they can get a lot of the things that the socialists want here. But it's not really socialism.
No,
And the socialism they're asking for in the DSA is, in effect, communism.
exactly.
But once
And
you say, yeah, go ahead.
Norway's the size of a postage stamp. Like,
Yeah.
not only is it a different system, but it could never work in America with 50 states and this landmass the way it works in Norway. It's just so naive. It'd be more like, we want socialism in Rhode Island. And you'd be like, we'll give that a try and let us know. But it's not even talking about the same thing. But yeah, to your point, what they want is really more like communism. And sometimes they're very honest about it when Hassan Piker will show up in these revolutionary communist outfits talking about the things he wants to see. And then people will say, oh, well, Piker is not running for office. It's like, first of all, not yet. And secondly, the people that are running for office are campaigning with him.
Yeah,
So,
that to me is just crazy. Why there isn't a complete disavowal? We've seen a little bit
yeah,
of that. I think Dingle in Michigan has said, "No, this guy's bad news.
yeah.
Get him away from this program." But then you've got El Sayed, who just continues to kind of put his foot in his mouth and be like, well, let's play footsie with Piker. I don't really support him, but he can campaign with me.
And Bernie was campaigning with him.
Yeah, well, at some point, because how old Bernie's what, like 85?
He's very old. Yeah, Bernie
And
is.
yeah, and I don't understand the concept of we need to get the old white men out of politics that you'll hear from a lot of people, and then at the same time they're saying here's Bernie and we love Bernie and let's keep pushing Bernie out there so that he can be our
Yeah,
standard bearer.
right. It's very hypocritical. It's like they use that when it's convenient, but then when it's not, it's like, well, here's Chuck Schumer. Well, here, they have plenty of old white guys themselves and old white ladies too. Um, but I do think there is a movement to just replace anyone who's old and white with anyone who's young and not white, which is part of why you're seeing some of these people win in New York City or New York State who seem to have nothing to recommend them except they're not old white guys
Yeah,
and they're
yeah,
radical socialist/communist.
Speaking of, how do we delicately segue to this one? Speaking of more socialist leaning places in the world, let's talk about Canada a little
Oh yeah.
bit because there's a lot going on in Canada. I've actually got a guest lined up later this week, I think tomorrow, to talk about the Canadian point of view on all things trade.
That'll be
Um,
useful.
yeah, but one thing that crossed the desk this morning from the website Juno News, which is a very independent Canadian outlet that I follow. I really like their work. They're doing a lot of interesting stuff up there. And this should be prefaced with the fact that the CBC is like the BBC in the UK. It is the government owned and operated entity that tells you the news. The CBC has told its reporters that it cannot refer to the 9/11 terrorist attacks as terrorist attacks or terrorism. They must use terms such as they were hijackings that led to passenger jet crashes. So, given that doublespeak Orwellianism, what do you make of what's going on in Canada?
I think Canada is such an interesting place because they care so much about what's going on in American politics, and we don't as often know what's going on with them. But I have a friend on X. His name's Alan Rule. Give him a shout out. And he has a YouTube channel as well. He's Canadian. He gives me some insight into Canada. And all of these opinions I'm going to say are not just his, but I have a couple friends that are Canadian, and they talk about how rapidly, well, actually it's been a long, slow thing, to be honest, but then very rapid. It's descended into just total radical leftism. So that if you say to me that now they can't even speak about terrorism, I'm not surprised at all. It seems like there's nothing, it's not even safe to speak in Canada anymore. It's like you can't say that a man is not a woman or a woman is not a man, dependent on their biology. You can't say these things anymore. Like you could risk, they're passing laws to risk being prosecuted for hate crimes, for just saying opinions, or for just stating biological truths. And it is all related to that wokeism we discussed, the victim narratives, the marginalization. They have a lot of people rising in their governmental system that represent those groups. And I think that it's not at all surprising to me that you can't even speak about terrorism anymore. They're becoming increasingly antagonistic toward Israel as well, which was not their historical position. And most of the countries that start to be, more than critical of Israel also begin to be more than friendly to Islam. So then you'll see things like that where you don't want to upset these Islamic countries. You don't want to upset these terrorist countries. You don't want to upset your constituents who might feel that what happened at 9/11 was an understandable reaction. I think we had a couple people that were just elected to office in NYC, and one of them, um, I don't know if she was an immigrant or her parents were, but I think she's Muslim, and she was just making the case that you can't really blame the terrorists that committed those actions because, there was all this institutional marginalization, and America had done so much to those countries, and what options did they have? I think this is the prevailing view of Canada as well. It's like, yes, it was wrong, but why did they do it? What made them do it? Did America make them do it? Did Israel make them do it? Um, all these inequalities in the Middle East, did it? Yeah. So I feel like this is the direction Canada's been going. We saw their reaction to COVID-19. They're ripping pastors out of their homes for holding like a 10-person church service. I'm no expert on Canada, but I can see what direction they're going. And Canadians I have spoken to are alarmed and concerned and feel like there's not much of a place for any conservatives in Canada anymore.
There's also the church burning,
The church burning. Oh, yes. That's
which
been a big thing.
it's been a
And I
big
think,
thing. It's been ignored too.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. And I think there's been a lot a lot of talk about whether, like you say, you can even have an opinion on that these burnings were purposeful, that these were the hate crimes, right? It's like, it's not even in vogue to say that anyone would attempt to harm a Catholic religious establishment, because that's not the narrative. So they've been largely ignored, or people have even been punished for speaking out against it, from what I understand. And I'm not saying legally punished, but socially punished.
Yeah, it's borderline impossible to be a conservative in Canada,
Yeah.
from what I can tell.
Yeah.
And then the folks, the name is going to escape me. There's a gentleman who runs Ezra Levant,
Okay.
Jewish Canadian.
Yeah.
And he's very outspoken and also gets into a lot of trouble with official trouble and then unofficial trouble, just trying to go to events and report on
Yeah.
things, and gets bullied quite a bit. But I mean, his crime appears to be that he's Jewish, he's Canadian, and he's asking questions, and that really doesn't bode well for a free society. But
I think
it's
it's becoming less free by the day in Canada. I think they're entering a real danger zone. Where I think free speech is, they don't have the same free speech protections we have to begin with. But I think it's becoming a thing of the past in Canada. And there's only one real acceptable viewpoint. So what are the dissenters going to do? I don't know. I worry about Canada a lot.
yeah, and I think with the as much as I'm following trade and tariffs, I can tell that the prevailing wisdom seems to be that there's one side that does the elbows up, you're either with us or you're against us thinking, and that seems to be dominated by the Carney government that says, yes, you want to fight, we're going to fight with you. And then there's different levels that I can see from the premiers of the various provinces. And the blessing here is that some of these deals, I mean, I think the blessing for the Canadians that want to see trade reestablished without crippling the country, seems to be there's a decent amount of power with the various premiers in that they can
Right.
make their own their deals. But one of the things that was scary that I'm going to be asking my guest about tomorrow is this whole oil pipeline thing. And I don't know how much you've seen on this, but the long story short is that the premier of Ontario is like, cut off the electricity and cut off the oil. But the problem is that the electricity that goes into the Northeast from Canada is like 5%. So we would just say, all right, well, coal-fired plants or more gas plants or whatever, and we cover
Right.
that. The oil that comes into Ontario from the western provinces goes through America. So it goes
Right.
through maybe
This
a
I
little,
do know.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe a little sliver of North Dakota, and then Minnesota, and then Michigan, and then it goes into Ontario. So
Yeah.
you kind of can't get it from there to there without coming through here. And that's something that I saw a clip of Doug Ford or Rob Ford. I think it's Doug Ford, the one
Yeah.
who's still alive, who's the Ontario premier, saying as much. Well, I can't believe that that's the way it's set up. But I mean, they don't have the pipelines, and part
That's
of it
the
is
problem. They
because,
rely on us a lot.
right.
And
Well, we
that's what
get,
Trump is
yeah, we
like
buy
throwing
70.
stones right around. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, we buy 70% of 70% of the stuff they sell to us.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's
And we buy from them, but it's not nearly, it's marginal to us, and we can replace it because we have
yes,
so many sources. They do not have a good replacement for us. So I see what Carney is doing. I see what Trump is doing. I see what Carney is doing. I don't always understand how harsh Trump is being on Canada, but I also am shocked that Carney is so oppositional and holding out so long, given how much they rely on us. I would have expected him, especially this newer deal fell through. I'm really just very surprised. I know there's so much anti-Trump sentiment, and I know Carney was basically elected on an anti-Trump platform. So I think he feels like he cannot bow down to this, and that he was elected to stand up to Trump, and then Trump starts doing all these tariffs. He's almost like between a rock and a hard place with his constituency. I don't know what he's going to do, but it's going to be bad for Canada long term if at least some of Trump's demands aren't met and they don't strike some kind of a deal for Canada.
Yeah, it's I can tell you from my most recent trip there. I've got friends in Toronto. Went up in May. Um, you don't talk about Trump at all. If they find out you're an American, you just don't talk about Trump. Um, and it's a really interesting dynamic up
It's
there.
too bad. I know there used to be, I think Canadians used to have a more positive view of us, but they are so left leaning that it's like, and Trump is such a bull in a china shop. It's like it has become something that is almost a Canadian national identity to hate Trump and to oppose everything he's doing.
Yeah, and I think they took the 51st state remarks
Very seriously.
very seriously,
Yeah.
as if we were going to send our military in to take over
Which
tomorrow.
most of us, I don't know about you, but I saw that as trolling, as,
Yes.
yeah, mostly a joke, a troll. Yes, used for political influence, like used almost to say we're stronger than you, we're bigger than you, and try to control, you know, what I'm saying in that sense, but to try to sort of throw his weight around, but in no sense a literal thing. It makes literally no sense. No, there was never an intention to make that the 51st state. Americans don't even want that. Particularly conservatives, what they, I'm sorry, but I don't want Canada voting in our elections like at all. So no.
I think a lot of us could live with Alberta.
Alberta,
Um,
yes, and there's talk of them breaking off, and I'm like, we'll take Alberta. That's,
yeah,
but
yeah,
no.
which is that's a whole other animal
I
to.
think they call that the Texas of Canada.
It's very Texan.
Yeah,
It's very free thinking, and they've got the energy. So,
yeah, yeah.
and right now
Alberta
that
is
seems,
different.
yeah, they've got the October, I believe it's October 19th is their referendum. That's not a referendum. It's a referendum to vote if they can have a referendum. So if the
Oh,
referendum
on
wins,
leaving. Yeah.
yeah, then they can actually vote to leave. But it's probably their only leverage point as a province. Some of the analysts that I've talked to about this situation are like, yeah, it's not happening. I'm sorry.
I don't think it can happen, and I'm sad about that. But I think, I mean, they have a way that it could. I don't think it's likely that it will. I've got my fingers crossed for Alberta. I don't, I don't know what
Well,
they'll.
the thing in there, I think they have a couple of things to on their side if they
Yeah.
want to be successful in this referendum. First of all, if you remember before Trump took back over, Pierre Polyev
Yes.
who's from Alberta and has moved back to a riding, a district in
Oh,
Alberta to
it
be
looked like he
member of.
was going to win briefly.
Yeah, well, it looked like he was going to win until um,
Trump stuff.
Trump stuff,
Yeah.
and because Polyev was so aligned with Trump, um, so that I think is part of the problem. I think, or part of the opportunity now is that he can be a little more vocal as the leader of the opposition. And then
Right.
Danielle
Yeah.
Smith, who's the Alberta premier, seems to have her head screwed on somewhat straight in that she knows that whatever deals that need to be negotiated right now have to benefit her province first and foremost because the rest of the country is not getting any energy
Yes.
unless Alberta is
Right.
catered to.
Right. They do have some leverage, and I hope they use it. I know most of the conservatives I know are from Alberta or would like to move there.
Well, we are nearing an hour, and this has been really cool. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask about?
I think we talked a little bit about the WNBA, and I think that's a fun topic.
Well, we can actually relate that back to Canada first because they
Okay.
in order to troll Sophie Cunningham, because
Yes.
she's the evil empire is led by Sophie Cunningham. In order to troll Sophie Cunningham, the Toronto Tempo, which is their WNBA franchise, it's their first season, they now have a non-binary mascot,
Oh, I did not know
which
that.
they launched within the last couple of weeks. And apparently, this non binary mascot likes to consume, and I'm quoting, soft shell tacos. Now, there's a lot to that involves going to parts of the internet you may not want to go to, but this is a definite troll on the part of the Toronto franchise. But the WNBA is really kind of shooting themselves in the foot
I agree.
because they cannot define what a woman is. But they know that it's not Enes Kanter Freedom.
Yeah, they know that it's not him. I mean, they know what a woman is. Like everybody knows. They don't know how to get out of this mess that they've made themselves and that he's exposed. I keep seeing people like the WNBA is so mad at him. And I believe Royce White, to a lesser extent, was jumping in on this too. They're so mad at him because they're saying, well, his bid to join the WNBA is not real. Like, this is just a troll. This is harassment. And I'm like, of course it's not real. The entire point of that was to, which I've been saying online, was to expose that the emperor had no clothes, which is what I think he has done and why they're so angry. And then of course they had that meeting so that they could decide like what they were going to do about it and maybe decide if they could figure out what a woman was. And then they came out of that meeting and they had no more clarity than before. They were just like, we've just decided that this is not a real attempt to join. And so we don't have to bow down to the culture war. So we're rejecting Enes and Royce and anybody who's trying to join. I'm like, on what pretext are you rejecting them? It's because you can tell they're men and because they don't actually believe themselves to be women. It's like, but if you could tell they were men and they believed themselves to be women, that would be different. And of course, that's what it is. And then if we saw in this recent game, right, with what is her name, Natasha Cloud,
Yes.
I believe, got in the altercation with Enes Freedom. And what was he doing before that altercation occurred? He was wearing a shirt that was basically defining woman as adult human female, I believe. He's sitting on the sideline. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she started that after she scored, and then she began this altercation with him, and then he stood up. But I think he's standing on the sideline, and or sitting on the sideline. My mom was pointing this out. He's wearing the shirt, but one of the WNBA coaches was wearing a shirt, right? That was saying like trans kids belong. And I'm like, so a shirt is not violence. Like a shirt. And so he's going to be banned from future games because one of the WNBA players who had a problem with him openly and publicly declaring what a woman is began an altercation from the court with a fan, or you could call him, of course, a rabble rouser, but a form of a fan on the sidelines. Like she should be banned. That is shocking
Yeah.
conduct.
And Natasha Cloud actually got in some trouble elsewhere
Oh,
when there was another sex toy thrown on the court at a game, and her response afterwards was, she used the word gay. I'm not sure I've got the right text, but she said, "You can't do that. That's gay. Stop being gay."
and is that what she got in trouble for?
I don't think she got in trouble for it with the league, but some of the left-leaning outlets that cover the sport were saying, okay, now you're using gay as a slur. You can't do that, which is a whole linguistic
Right.
circular thing because now she can claim, well, I am gay because I believe she's an out individual.
Okay.
So she can use the term to describe something and it's not a pejorative and it's just.
And that's always the game. It's like, it's just a ridiculous linguistic game. And that is what I think is so great about what Ennis Freedom did, which obviously was a big troll, a big joke. But it was exposing the idiocy of this whole underlying ideology, which cannot define itself, which is in opposition to reality and truth. What has blown my mind as a woman, though, and what actually angers me, is how aggressive these WNBA players are in defending something that they don't themselves have to deal with. It's like French women are dealing with this because there's a trans player who's dominating the French leagues right now. And then, swimmers have to deal with it, like Riley Gaines. A lot of high school track runners have to deal with it. We've seen weightlifters and boxers, like someone got their face shattered. Another girl had brain damage in volleyball. But there are not currently any men playing in the WNBA. So it's so easy for them to say trans kids belong and wear the t-shirt and yell at Ennis for his intolerance, but they don't actually have to stand by what they are defending. Maybe they will, and that's what would have been so funny if he actually did enter that league. Then they would actually have to stand by what they're defending. So I just think they're just giant hypocrites.
It's and it's interesting too because we should be. Caitlin Clark is a force of nature. She's just amazing to watch. She has the strengths against her that she's a straight white female that's really good at basketball. And this opens up a whole political can of worms for the league because they don't want. And Sophie Cunningham is really attractive female, and
she's been very, very entertaining lately.
Very entertaining. I actually saw a post, I think it was on LinkedIn, that was claiming that she was just another DEI hire. They were trying to make a point that they were, well, if she was African American working in another business, you would just say, well, she's a DEI hire. So why don't we say that about her because she's not putting up the numbers that say other players are putting up. But she's bringing the eyeballs to the league. So
she sure is. And I am the stereotype that does not watch the WNBA. The joke is like, no one watches. That's me. I don't watch. I see these clips. So I honestly don't know Sophie Cunningham's numbers or not. I do know that Caitlin Clark is out of this world, right? And certainly no one could call her a DEI hire. And she's gotten so much hate. Again, I don't watch, but I know a lot of people have claimed some of it is racial. And I think it's hard to deny when you look at some of the incidents that have happened. I think there's definitely a component. And I think if it was reversed, it would at least be a conversation they were having. And it's a conversation they refuse to have, which is really unfortunate. I think the WNBA is doing everything wrong, basically.
Well, and Sophie Cunningham said as much when she, in an interview recently, said something along the lines of, we're going to need a new commissioner next year, which, you can't do that in most leagues. You cannot say we want to fire the commissioner.
She says whatever she wants. That's what I do know about her.
We stand Sophie.
Yeah, it's refreshing. Sure.
It is refreshing. Any other final thoughts?
Gosh, I think my final thoughts, they just go back to the beginning of our conversation, where I just feel like it's so important right now as a conservative that people hold the line, that we make clear what we stand for, how it's different than what the left is presenting with socialism, DSA, all of this, and how it's not represented by some of these fringe forces like the Candaces and the Tuckers and the Nick Fuenteses on the right. And that's pretty much what I devote my time to with the blog and the social media. Just I try to focus on the people that I think are standing up for what's right and just amplify them. And then the people that are the opposite, you just push back. I think that's all any of us can do. It's what I try to do. And I appreciate coming on here so I can get my thoughts out, opinions. It was a lot of fun.
We appreciate having you on the show, Jackie Chea. Thanks so much. And if you're watching, folks, like, subscribe, share, all those fun things, because it really helps. It helps my ego. I mean, because that's what this is all about, right? No, I'm kidding. It helps it helps the algorithm. Jackie, thanks for hopping on the show.
Thank you.